Hello and welcome back, folks. This is Chris in central Pennsylvania. South Africa's members of parliament gave their responses to Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address from last week in parliament. Now, before we talk about that, we should talk about the outcome of Donald Trump's Friday executive order, which suspended all future foreign assistance to South Africa and extended a reopening of the refugee resettlement program to Afrikaners, an undefined group. So that's what happened. Nothing else happened. The United States spent about $440 million in foreign assistance to South Africa. Much of that went to healthcare, some to HIV, some to other things. So here's what members of parliament had to say, including party leaders and chief whips and such. Now, unfortunately, these members of parliament chose to attack America, and they are not reading the room. This is not going to get them what they want. The behavior of members of parliament and Cyril Ramaphosa, as well as the media in South Africa, intentionally poking the bear, insulting America and Donald Trump, is not a strategy that's going to win. And they're not very bright when it comes to international relations. So let's start with the responses. First out of the gate, John Steenhuisen from the Democratic Alliance, current Minister of Agriculture. When a country faces a crisis, it needs to unite and navigate against the threat. That's what we must do now. The threat? Did John Steenhuisen just call America a threat to South Africa? And the Democratic Alliance is talking about sending a delegation to America to smooth relations over, and you're calling us a threat? That's provocative, John. Now, am I reading into that? John Steenhuisen will probably say, yes, I'm reading into it because the threat is that they'll lose their trade preferences. Well, that's a very real consequence, particularly when you say something like that. He said, we must approach our trading partners and seek to lower tariff barriers across the board to compensate for any increase in tariffs by the U.S. Well, there are no increase in tariffs by the U.S., John. Are you just predicting what's coming? And who exactly are you going to reach out to? The BRICS nations? You have no treaty with BRICS nations. China is not going to lower any barriers for your goods, and China represents 70% of the GDP of BRICS with the new members. Steenhuisen, who is also the Minister for Agriculture, as I mentioned, called the expropriation bill to be amended for better protection of property rights. Well, that's a good point, Sean, but it's not the proximate cause of the pickle that South Africa finds itself in. The United States has bullied nations before, imposed senseless and arbitrary sanctions, and threatened wars. We agree with you, Mr. President, that we should not be bullied. So says EFF leader Julius Malema. So clueless, so out of touch with reality. Juju, you have no idea what bullying is. The U.S. has not imposed any sanctions in South Africa, nor has it made any threats, let alone threatening Pretoria with war. John Schlope, the parliamentary leader of MK, the official opposition, really, is that what they're called now? Said South Africa should strengthen its economic relations with fellow BRICS countries to counteract trade threats by Trump. Trump has made no trade threats to South Africa. This is a fiction in your mind. Now, someone should remind impeached Judge John Schlope that you have no treaties with BRICS countries, and you'll get nothing from them. There are no threats to counteract here, but keep up the insults, and not only will threats likely materialize, but so will punitive measures. While we expect President Trump to end the imperialist war of NATO in Russia, it's not NATO's war in Russia. What the hell are you talking about? Russia attacked Ukraine. And to disassociate from the neocolonial and dishonest so-called green energy transitions imposed on the developing world, we do not agree with him and his promotion of white supremacists who claim they are facing genocide in South Africa. White supremacist. How does one respond to that ludicrous race-hustling lunacy? No one is claiming genocide. The only folks discussing genocide are you, John Schlope, and the captured media, spreading lies to discredit your political opponents. Nobody is claiming genocide, except the leftists trying to discredit people who are opposing expropriation on compensation. There is no genocide, and there is no threat of genocide in South Africa. There are legitimate cries of historically and presently oppressed and excluded black majority who demand the return of the land and wealth to the ownership and control of the people as a whole, and not to the privileged few beneficiaries of apartheid and colonialism. Presently oppressed majority. The same majority that have run government for 31 years, unopposed, and found it necessary to pass 142 racially discriminatory laws. Let's see, the majority runs the courts, runs the military, runs the police, runs the government, and you're crying victimhood? Get this man some mood stabilizers, stat. Rise Mzansi leader Sengezo Ziba had the following to say. Now is the time to build alternative export and foreign exchange earning streams and to guard jealously trade and other relationships we already have. We must act with urgency and speed while being calm and considered in how we respond to a clearly tempestuous administration across the Atlantic. Tempestuous administration. Well, ZB does win the Big Word of the Day award. Heck, he's even accurate about the storm coming. Keep undermining U.S. interests and see what the consequences are that come your way. The untruths U.S. was peddling, ZB said, were deadly serious because they affected 17% of South Africa's HIV budget and about 15,000 associated jobs. Well, that's factually inaccurate, ZB. The money is not part of South Africa's budget. That money goes to third parties, non-government organizations, and contractors, not Pretoria. So that's disingenuous. If South Africa had taken responsibility for its HIV crisis, then it would be your budget issue. But you've gotten a free pass from the United States government and the generous American taxpayers to the tune of $8.1 billion over 22 years for what was supposed to be a 5-year program to help you address this and develop your own response to it. And 22 years later, you're still suckling on the U.S. teat. That's our money, which we don't have. We had to borrow it to give that money to you because we spent $2 trillion more than we had last year. So you're factually incorrect and you're disingenuous by claiming that's part of South Africa's HIV budget. It's not. It's not. Mr. President, we must not be caught napping. It's only a matter of time before we're removed from the African Growth and Opportunity trade arrangement, and God knows what other consequences. Well, ZB, the smarter bet is to behave like adults, stop intentionally provoking the lion, and perhaps maybe even listen to Action SA's Athol Trollop. You've chosen friends that are pariah nations who are neither democratic nor uphold human rights, nations at war with their own people, oppressive regimes. Conversely, we treat democratic nations, our major trading partners, with disdain and insult. The New World Order sees which side you've picked, and now the chickens are coming home to roost. Action SA's Chief Whip Athol Trollop. Ladies and gentlemen, the African National Congress is responsible for this. They created this mess. And no matter how many lies they tell, it will not change the reality that Washington is pissed off over the party's collaboration with the state sponsor of terrorism in Tehran. And members of parliament whine about being bullied when Washington has taken no punitive actions against South Africa? Well, not yet, at least. Look around and find out. What say you, South Africa? Cheers.